Hello, friends. It's time for quick thoughts on Celeste, which the credits are rolling right now. I don't know whether I even showed that in frame properly. Um, I beat it in 2 days. It's a very short game. I did not 100% it as of this video, so I just want to let you know about that. But I wanted to give you my thoughts on it because there are a lot of people I know that are probably going to make videos about it, so I'm not going to. I also think that this is a game. Okay, well, let me get into it. This is weird because I feel like this game and a lot of what it tries to do is trying to be the end is nigh. But I know it's not like they were looking at that game like, oh, we want to be that game because obviously it came out, mid last year. It's not like this game took many years to make, and it's a fantastic game, right? Um, but I can't help but draw parallels between it and the end is nigh with regards to how it focuses on gameplay, and things like that. But I think I don't know, it didn't grip me the same way. So let me go through this. So basically, you're a chick climbing a mountain. There's this guy named Theo who's with you sometimes too, and he's a pretty cool dude. The catch is the mountain has this sort of like magical realism to it. So, basically, as you climb the mountain, you encounter this demon version of yourself, which is known as part of me, is what the name of the villain is, villain, quote unquote. And the whole deal is that our main character, Madeline, is sort of dealing with depression and anxiety. She has multiple panic attacks throughout the climb. And so it's kind of learning to accept this sickness, or, however you want to view it, disorder. I don't like using the term disorder when talking about mental health. I don't think that's right. But just something that it's a part of you. This anxiety, depression, uncertainty, it's a part of you, and it's not something that's going to fully go away. But it's something that you have to live with and work with to succeed, and that's sort of the point of the story, right? Now, there's an epilogue segment that I'm going to wait to play, so maybe I highly doubt that this epilogue segment's going to change my full opinions of this entire game. So, spoilers ahead. That's my thing of the game. I think you should get it, but I also don't like it as much as The End Is Nigh. But that was also my game of the year last year. So, like, keep that in mind. So now, basically, there's a prologue, and it's like, oh, there's this mountain, you're going to climb it. You're crazy for trying to climb it. There's chapter 1, which is just a normal kind of situation, nothing crazy going on there. And then is it chapter 1 or chapter 2? Yeah, it's chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 2 is where you first encounter part of me, I believe. Or maybe it's chapter 1 where you counter it first, but chapter 2 is where it like becomes shit gets real, because the end sequence of chapter 2, basically you climb up this area in chapter 1, you're like, cool, I'm going to take a nap, right? Or go to sleep. And chapter 2 starts in like a nightmare. And you can tell it's a nightmare because the stone that's right there is like, this is for all the fallen climbers, whatever. The text is all distorted because it's like a nightmarish setting, right? And you don't know this like right off the bat because you're just like, oh, what is this weird? Maybe it's a weird thing about the mountain, right? Like, we don't know. But it's a nightmare. So you go through, and what happens, you encounter this part of me in that segment, and then there's this whole chase sequence, which is like super thrilling. It made me anxious. It made me stress out throughout the entire experience. And I thought that was really cool because there was already a few hints about this being about sort of like mental health, anxiety sort of angle. And so I thought that the difficulty and the tone that the game sets with its gameplay was trying to elicit that feeling in the player. And if that's what he was trying to do, succeeded overwhelmingly in chapter 2. And the cool part was you go through this and you go through it and you're like, I need to get out of here. And then you wake up from the nightmare. And then you play through the small amount of bit that you played through in the nightmare, because your nightmare over dramatized it. What you actually had to go through next was a really, really easy segment of the mountain, but in the nightmare it became super difficult because of the fact that you weren't thinking logically. There's this part of you that is dealing with this situation. It is by far the most brilliant chapter in the entire freaking game. I loved chapter 2 because of how it did all of that. Chapter 3, you go into this little hotel situation. It has long been abandoned, but the owner of the hotel, I don't remember his name, is still there as a ghost. He like flies around places and stuff like that. But all he wants to do is be an accommodating host, and you can tell that he's dealing with some personal issues as well. But Theo, the guy that's chilling with you, is like, I don't like this guy. We need to get out of here. But you're like, no, I think that he's just misunderstood, you know? So you go and help him out. You help him sort some books and stuff like that. But then right at the end, that part of you snaps and shows up. Is it, like I said, a separate character is part of me. Shows up and like rails this guy and is like, she didn't want to stay, you're just being all creepy, like blah blah blah, you know, all that. And then he feels abandoned at that point, like the ghost feels abandoned and turns into a monster and chases you through the end sequence of chapter 3, which I thought was really good. Although from a gameplay standpoint, the charge mechanic there was a bit I didn't like it that much, and it just kind of frustrated me a little bit. It was on one side of the screen, and then it would be like, I'm charging at you, foom. But like, based on the layout of the levels, that wasn't always a good situation, and there were times in there where it was just kind of I'm going to lose. The good news is that there's fast respawn, so even though you shouldn't ever have those situations, when they come up, they're not that big of a deal. But it just kind of adds to this overwhelming stress that you're supposed to be feeling throughout the game. This is my interpretation, right? So that's that. Then I don't know. After that, the next chapter after that, I believe it was a wind chapter, so it was just like, oh, you gotta watch out for the wind, and as you get more and more, like, as your character becomes more and more insecure, the wind pushes up, so it's kind of like a metaphor, but that one didn't really resonate with me that much, I'll be honest. I don't think it served its purpose very well. I mean, it was good gameplay-wise, I just don't think that, in terms of what he was trying to do narratively, I don't think that worked as well. And then you have chapter 5, chapter 5, yeah. Chapter 5 is the mirror house place. I don't know what it was. And the whole idea is you're going into it and you're like, oh no, it's the part of me is going to show up, because the part of me originally always shows up when there's a mirror. So it's like, oh no, there's going to be all everywhere. And that's kind of what happens. But the crazy thing that happens, you're going through and it's just dark and ambient. And then you encounter Theo, who's trapped in a mirror. And he's like, I don't know how I got here. And you're like, oh crap, what's up? And then eventually you get trapped in the mirror yourself, which is your own nightmare that you've sort of created, basically. And you encounter Theo. He's trapped in this like glass thing that can't be broken, because he's trapped in his own insecurity or whatever. I'm not really sure how that thematically works. It works from a gameplay standpoint, because you like chuck him at switches and stuff like that, and he's like, yay, I'm helping. And it's like, woo, he's helping. But yeah, so it kind of works. I'm not sure. And I liked how, like, when you were in the mirror, the first thing that happens, you control the enemy, which is this like chargy guy, and you like charge at your main character, so you know before you even go into it that this is something that you created, or Madeline created at least. And then the rest of the chapter is this escape sequence with Theo. It's very kind of puzzle focused, but there's this whole anxiety tension about it, because those dudes that are charging, they're kind of like, I'm trying to think of the best example for an enemy that would be like. It's kind of like in The End is Nigh. Yeah, I'm going to compare it with The End is Nigh again. The dudes in the Arid Flats, or Gloom, the harder version of Arid Flats, that like you land on the platform, it goes and it's like just charges at you. Imagine that, except it's not bound to a platform. It's just everywhere. So yeah, it sucks. The thing is, you can jump on it to briefly stun it, which is useful, but it's very imprecise, honestly. I think it would have been better if you could stun it by charging into it, because the jumping on things mechanic in general just is kind of sloppy. The hitboxes aren't perfect on that. So I think it would have been better if it was like you could dash into it or jump on it, maybe, or something along those lines. Same thing applies to the snowballs in the previous section, by the way, the wind bit. Towards the end, there are these snowballs that fly across the screen, and it wasn't that frustrating because you could see them from like a mile away. But like, if you could charge through them, I think it would make for more kinetic gameplay, in my opinion. So anyway, I wish you could have charged through those guys. But for the most part, the sequence is okay. And I get what he was going for. I guess it just didn't resonate as much. I mean, I've yet in this game to feel the level of like tension that Chapter 2 brought, really. And Chapter 3 was close. But I don't know. I felt I was so incredibly blown away by how fantastic Chapter 2 was that I think everything else they try to do after that, even if it's more, you know what I mean? Even if it's more of extravagant, I don't think it executes as well. I don't think it's as tight as Chapter 2. Because when it's part of you is cloning your every move. It's like the shadow clones in the Mario games. So it's like, the game, from a gameplay perspective, it's beautiful because everything that you do, you're screwing yourself. And then that creates more tension. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then that makes you stressed out. And that's kind of the point. So I loved that. But then everything else from here on out, from Chapter 3, 4, 5, suddenly these manifestations of yourself are now controlled by the AI. And not that it's like super AI. It's very systematic, very simple. But when there's imprecision there, you can't help but turn the blame sort of from yourself to the game sometimes, even if it's not rational to do so. Like, in Super Meat Boy, The End is Nigh, there are enemies that are really cheap, and not cheap, sorry. They feel cheap, but they're super fair because they do the same thing every single time. And for the most part, I would agree that they do the same thing in Celeste. I think the difference is that there's a bit of a lack of precision there. Like, jumping on things in this game, like jumping on an enemy or jumping on a ball is super imprecise. So I think if there was more precision to that, then I wouldn't feel this way about it. I think that's the best way to put it. So, okay, you go through there and you meet up with Theo and you're all like, oh man, that was a big deal. And Chapter 6 begins with this huge debrief that I really, really liked because it allows you to learn more about the characters before the real climax of the story. I think that was really well done. And so what happens is Theo is like, okay, I'm going to go to bed. And you're like, I'm going to go to bed. And then when you go to bed, you basically fly up, and the best way to explain this is that there was this feather thing that was brought back as a motif for like coping with panic attacks, and the feather, it becomes an item in the game that's collectible that lets you fly for a temporary amount of time, and it's actually a really good power up. It's probably my favorite of the mechanics in the game that were added beyond the original like air dash or boost or whatever you want to call it gameplay. Aside from that, and the gems that you collect that like refill your boost meter, like besides that, I think the flying mechanic is like the coolest thing because it's like you jump into it and then it's like it actually uses the analog stick, and it's hard to find 2D platformers that like are better to play on an analog stick, but this one genuinely is. So and that was really cool. It made for more seamless, it's just like going from one thing to the next. There's nothing in this game that makes you stop necessarily, which I think was good. Aside from maybe the stamina meter, but I think that, and it isn't a meter, but like the stamina for clinging onto things, but I think that's important because it kind of adds that like a small amount of tension when you're like jumping and climbing and stuff like that. I think that's important. So when you fly up and you're meeting with this part of me and you're like, yo, I need to leave you. And part of me is like, no, you're not going to leave me. And then gets all like crazy and like captures you and throws you off the mountain. You're like, what's going on? And you go way below and you're like, oh, I'm going to give up. And that's like the low point of the story. It's kind of like a movie plot, typical situations like, oh, we're at our low point. But then we're going to figure out what we did wrong. And then we're going to change. And then we're going to shoot back up higher than we did before. It's so formulaic now at this point. And it's like, come on, like, I get what they're doing. So it's like, okay, you meet the old lady again, who you've seen a few times throughout this. So in the beginning, she's like, well, did you ever ask her why she's scared? Why this part of you is scared? And I'm like, what are you... Okay, like, I'll roll with it. If this is supposed to be a manifestation of, like, anxiety or, like, mental health situation, then... I mean, I get it, but, like, that's kind of out of nowhere, I guess. And I just didn't get where that was leading, I suppose. And then you go in and you encounter the part of me right after a bit of a sequence with some bumpers, literal bumpers. Also, the crazy thing about Chapter 6, like up to that point, is that it's super open. Like I legit didn't know which way to go, but I just kept picking places and they happened to lead where I needed to go. So I don't know whether it's that like there were multiple paths that lead to the same place and like some of them have strawberries, or whether it's like, I don't know. Because throughout the game there are these collectible strawberries and collectible crystal heart guys. And there's cassette tapes. As far as I know, the strawberries don't do anything. Already worse than the end is nigh. 0 out of 10. No, I'm kidding. But the hearts, I believe, my understanding is that they unlock something at the end of the game, like a bonus chapter or something like that. And then the cassette tapes unlock harder versions, like Dark World versions of the original chapters that are there, right? So that's how that works. So usually, like kind of like the tumors in The End Is Nigh, I'm telling you, this is a very apt comparison. There are sometimes you find tumors in the levels themselves, but then there's sometimes you find the strawberries in like hidden secret areas that are more puzzle focused in their level design. All brilliant. I love it. There's some strawberries that you go in and the strawberry's wings, and if you boost at all during that room, then the strawberry flies away. So you have to do it with like normal platforming. It's like that's so brilliant. I love it. It's so good. So anyway, you encounter part of you or part of me, right? And then you're like, oh, why are you scared? And it's like, don't get near me. Oh, I don't like you, And it's like, okay. I get it. Okay. I'm just saying this could have been handled better is the best way to put it. I think at this point it's just a bit too cliche that it kind of pulls away from the whole point of what they're trying to hit at. Because if it was just... Because I think instead of maybe you have an old lady there, but instead of being like, have you ever wondered why it's scared, whether it's scared, and then you immediately realize like, oh, this part of me isn't a bad part of me, even though it has demonic eyes and purple hair and dark colors everywhere, all the things that make it bad. No, it's just another part of me that's scared. This is kind of where it starts to fall apart a little bit. So. Okay, so I think first off, right, representing the anxiety kind of thing with the demonic version of you, good choice. Because when you're in like chapter 2 or in some of the situations throughout the game, it appears you're like, shit. And it's in those moments that you had a panic attack on like the monorail when it showed up, And so it's like, it makes sense, the connections work. But the realization that that condition or that situation isn't inherently just an all bad unilateral thing, that should not have been realized through an old lady saying, have you ever asked it why it's scared? Because that's not how it works. Like I legit, like I have 2 friends that are seriously dealing with this now, and they're scared, right? Sometimes, and they're uncertain sometimes, and they're depressed sometimes, and they go through all these different things. But it's not like they don't ask themselves why they feel that way, because they do. The issue is that they're at a point where, and there's a perfect analogy at the beginning of chapter 6, where she's sitting there with Theo, and Theo's like, what's depression like? And she's like, it's like I'm at the bottom of the ocean and I can't get out, or something along those lines. And I was like, that's how they explain it to me. It's like you're in the darkest, crappiest place ever, and there's no way out. And you might be able to see a light in the distance, but you can't go there, or you feel like you can't go there, right? So if she's explaining that before the old lady's like, have you ever asked it why it's scared? She knows why she's scared. She clearly knows why she's scared because she already explained it. It is what it is. And also, it's not like the part of me answers, oh, this is why I'm scared. That's not the point, So that framing, that whole way it's framed just doesn't really work for me. And I'm saying this as someone who not has dealt with it personally, admittedly. I mean, I've been depressed before. I would not say I suffer from chronic depression, but I mean, to be fair, I have not been diagnosed, so that's what I'm saying I don't. But I know people who have dealt with severe anxiety or continue to deal with severe anxiety and depression. So that framing does not work. Just plain doesn't work. But let's ignore that. and let's go and encounter the part of me. And the part of me is like, don't touch me, right? Now, in certain situations, depending on the person, depending on their circumstance, that might be the reaction. If someone sees someone suffering from those kind of conditions in a vulnerable moment, sometimes the immediate thing that they say is, don't get near me, because I don't want you to see this side of me. I don't want you to see me like this, because you, person that's better than me, because depression, it doesn't deserve that, you know? And there's the guilt associated with it, right? So then basically what happens is what I would call the only real boss fight in the game happens, which is basically the part of you basically pushing you away by means of lasers and, crazy projectiles, because it's a video game. Now, once again, the lasers I'm not a fan of, because the level design and how it works leads to some situations in which it feels as if that there is no escape from the situation and there was nothing you could have done to prevent it. So I think the homing laser situation, not that great. And that's just because I don't feel that the levels were designed with it in mind, personally. But they're all beatable, obviously. It just doesn't feel like it was designed with her being in this location and firing lasers at you. Also, the boss fight drags out for like way too long. Like, it's legit like a 15-20 minute boss fight. And there's one part where it's like, oh, she's calming down, and then it's like, psych, nope, there's like a whole other part of this boss fight, and it's the same thing again, and it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. And so it just became a drag, and the whole thematic like punch of what that could have been just kind of died for me, honestly. So you beat the boss, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna work together now. And then you go through this brief sequence at the end, and it's like, oh crap, we can do crazy things together. And then you start chapter 7, which is climbing back up to the summit. You go through little pieces of the areas you've been through, except different level design because it's harder. And suddenly now you have 2 boosts instead of 1, because there's 2 of you that are boosting at the same time, because you basically fused together, become one person, right? Cool. And the cool thing about that too is that in chapter 3, there's this little arcade situation, this little old retro console, and you're playing like an 8-bit, like more 8-bit version of the game, right? It's an 8. This version is more like 1632-bit. So like the 8-bit version of the game that was apparently the Game Jam version, and towards the end of it, you get the ability to do 2 boosts. So it's like, oh, that's where the 2 boosts comes back. Oh man, that's crazy, right? And then chapter 7 is this super hard, super long gauntlet of going through things, which I thought was pretty neat. Because it's like to be fair, right? That is at that point falling action, but it's justified, and I think it works. It's just that because the thematic punch of the boss fight in chapter 6 didn't hit me as well, chapter 7 I think felt more like a drag as a result. And I also think it could have worked if there was like, if they framed it a little bit better. So for example, like if it's like, we're gonna work together, like they have these blue orbs that you collect, and then you get like a boost from the part of you, But I think it would have been better if instead of having that, if it was like the part of you saves you from falling every time. And it's not like it just is like, oh, the game's broken. It's like it puts you back at the start of that like challenge. So it's like the same thing as it is now. It's just that the framing device now is now not that you're dying and that it's undone and you have checkpoints. It's that you're being saved by this part of you, because you can't beat this without this part of you. So it's like you're beating it in one go. That I don't know. That's just my idea. I don't know. There are other ways you could do it. I like how like at the end of each section they like debrief a little bit and are like, yo, they debrief about each kind of chapter. So like they debrief about the monorail, or they debrief about the hotel owner, and they debrief about all this kind of stuff. And it's like cool, because they're like becoming more of the same person, so they bond even more. And I think that kind of works. It's kind of like, and I like it, but at the same time, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just my own lack of understanding. I feel like someone who's actually dealing with this would understand that situation better. Because I'm speaking as a third party, right? To me, I would imagine it make more sense if it was that the part of you was unchanging, because unless you're like medicating or going through severe therapy, I guess the part of you is changing because you're like dealing with your problems and the problems get a little bit better. Okay, you know what? I take it back. That's fine. I take it back. That's fine. Okay. So we get to the summit, credits roll. I'm at this epilogue thing. Let's see what's up. I'm gonna do this real quick. We're gonna go here. Hi. Okay. How do I stand this up so you can like see what's going on? Okay. Hi. This is really bad framing. Okay, let's see what's going on. It's like, oh, it's the old lady. Welcome back. Madeline, did you make the summit? Yeah, we did. Oh, hell yeah, we did. It was incredible. Beautiful, isn't it? It's beautiful. I didn't think it would be worth it. It's the insecurity. It's the part of it's the part of me is like insecure. It's like I don't think it'd be worth it. I don't even think you saw that. But it totally was. It totally was because video game. It totally was because video game. I should have given you my phone so you take the ultimate selfie. There's recurring selfie motif. It's a good time. Oh snap! The hotel owner's here. Oh, there's told me there's gonna be a party. Oh, it's Mr. Oshiro's the hotel owner's name. I forgot. Oh, he left his hotel. It's like, oh, it's so sweet. Strawberry pie, because strawberries. I wonder if you get zero strawberries, whether it'd be like, oh, we don't have anything to eat. That sucks. Oops. Oh, I'm guessing that the text would be different. Okay, so they're like trying the strawberry pie. So there's a strawberry pie, and I'm guessing that the text would be different based on how many strawberries you collect. So I got 99 strawberries. So it's like they're like, oh, this is pretty good, I'm hoping it's different. I legit don't know. Okay. And then that's it. And then this is the bonus chapter that requires chapter 8 core. And then this is what requires the about a year later. Oh, there's more story. Screw this being quick thoughts. This is like extended thoughts. Yo, extended thoughts from 3-minute days, my boy. Good to see you again. Here's the cave I told you about. Let's go. Oh, let's go. We're going. Oh no, there's actually things I need to do. Oh no. Okay. So I just want to give my thoughts on this real quick. What? Yo, what? These platforms don't like reset your stuff. Okay, that's crazy. This is the worst framing of all time. You can't even see me. This passage leads to set in the mountain. Don't get any deeper than this. Be careful though. When you get to this, I feel like I'm a Let's Player again. Yeah, so I can't get past here until I get hearts. That's what I thought. 4 crystal hearts. Cool. And I'm guessing that the next room is like more crystal hearts or something. So you can get through like part of it or something. Cool. It's a good time. We're returning to map. Okay, so that's the game. I don't know. It's good. I would say you should play it. If you didn't tell, I think that it kind of screws up towards the end. But I also understand that there are people that actually deal with this because I know them. But I feel like that the real question is, as someone for me is saying that, I don't know whether this works, I think the real person you need to ask is someone who is dealing with this. So I'm really curious to see what someone who is dealing with these issues thinks about this and how it represents that situation. And And until I get that answer, I guess I refrain from final judgment. But I think from the things I can judge are the gameplay. I think the gameplay is very precise, aside from very specific sequences in which jumping on things is very difficult, and certain aspects of things targeting you feels like the levels aren't designed around it, so it can be unfair at times. And that's basically all I can say about this at this point. We are 30 minutes in. I am going to go. Goodbye.